Hi, in this video, I'm going to walk you through everything you need for the AP Create Performance task. By the end of this video, you're going to have 3 big things accomplished. The first one is a PDF of your entire code. The second thing is a video of your code running. And the third thing is screenshots of your code for the AP exam, specifically for your FRQ. Now, before you start any of the stuff that I'm going to walk you through, make sure that your code is completely done. My biggest suggestion is that before you start any of this, is that you give your program to somebody else in the room. And then you can ask them if you have all the requirements for the AP Create Performance task. So what are the requirements? You need one function that has a parameter. Inside that same function, there has to be a loop and an if statement. Your program also has to be using a list in some meaningful way. So you can have a million different functions. Just one of them is going to be the one that you're going to use on the AP exam. And that very same function with a parameter, a loop, and an if statement is the same function you're going to take screenshots of. Now, the easiest way to meet all the requirements is use that loop to go through a list and using your if statement to check something in the list. And the function has to be able to be called twice or is called twice. But basically, if you call your function with a specific argument, something happens. But if you call it again with a different argument, or it has the ability to be called again with a different argument, something different happens in your function, meaning a different line of code runs specifically based on the if statement. That's the best way to get the point. Now, all of that should sound familiar because I've been talking about it throughout the entire year. But I know I'm your lowercase t teacher, and we love to play the game Mr. Diaz didn't say that. But if you remember, that was one of the first assignments you had. 2045. That's right. I hope you remember now. Anyhow, let's get back to it. Okay, so now let's take a look at each requirement that we need. The first thing you're going to need is a PDF of your entire code. You're going to print that out in CodeHS, and you're going to upload it to the digital portfolio on AP Classroom. So your program is going to need some type of input. Typically, that means typing with your keyboard or clicking with your mouse. Your program also has to use a list. The list could be empty or it could be filled. You can have more than one list. You just have to be using a list in some meaningful way. Remember that a list allows us to store many things into one variable. This has a ton of benefits. The biggest one is that we don't have to put a million variables for a million different things. What we can do instead is use a loop to go through a list and check for the things that we need, or for the things that we don't have. It also allows our code to be readable by other programmers, including ourselves. It reduces the overall amount of code, and we can kind of abstract away all that complex stuff. For example, if I have a list of all the teams in the NBA, and my variable is called NBA teams, I don't really need to go in and look at every single thing. I know it's holding all the NBA teams. And so I could use a loop to go through and pick a team or figure out what team I need to remove. That's just a quick example, but there are countless ways we use lists. We do it all the time in our real lives. So one of the things that you need is what's called a procedure. Now, procedure is just a different way of saying function. And so your function needs to have at least one parameter. You can have more, but the minimum is 1. You have the option of having a return in your function, but it's not mandatory. So your function needs to have sequencing, selection, and iteration. What that means is sequencing is just the order of things and when they need to happen. And then selection is really just using if statements to check something. Iteration is just a loop. So if you have a loop in your function, you have an if statement and a parameter, you've already met all the requirements. The other thing you're going to need is a video of your code running. And my biggest recommendation is that you run it more than once and you show different outputs based on different types of inputs. For example, if I put an age of 12, something should happen for 12-year-olds. If I put an age of 30, something should happen for 30-year-olds. You want to keep your video less than 60 seconds, but really the target is 30 seconds. And I'll just highlight something important. When someone is scoring your exam, if they're looking at your video, that means they couldn't figure out what you were saying on your FRQ. They couldn't really figure out in your code, your PDF of your entire code, they couldn't figure out what your code is actually doing. And so they look at your video to figure out how your code runs. And I can tell you from experience that if the reader is at that point of watching your video, that means your FRQ is on shaky grounds. So you really want to keep your video short and straight to the point, because the reader is trying to score as many projects as possible. And so you really don't want to piss them off further by having a 60-second video. When you're making your video, don't include any sound unless it's really important to your project. Your video cannot have anything about you as well. For anything that you upload to AP Classroom, it's super important that nothing gets tied back to you. They can't know your name, they can't know your age, they can't know your race, etc. And this guarantees that there's no bias when they go to actually score your exam. So when you're making a video, do not include yourself, don't record your face, don't record anything that has your name. Make sure that your video ends in one of these formats. Typical formats are MOV for Apple devices and MP4 for Windows devices. The maximum size of your video can only be 30 megabytes. And the last thing you're going to need is screenshots of your code. I'm going to walk you through all of these things right now. If you're in my class, you'll remember that we did a project that was Harry Potter themed. If you don't know what the Pottermore quiz is, it's basically a series of questions that figures out which house you belong to. For example, House Slytherin, House Gryffindor, House Ravenclaw. So I'm going to use that project for this video's demonstration, but I've added a few functions since. One of the functions I've added is going to Gringotts Bank to add money, withdraw money, and the money that they use in the Harry Potter universe is galleons. In the original project, we made a function that allowed the wizard to go to Ollivanders to buy a wand. So I'm going to reuse that function, but I did change it up a little bit for this demonstration. So let's go ahead and take a look at that project now. When you log into AP Classroom, you're going to have a digital portfolio where you're going to be able to upload your video, your PDF, and all your screenshots. It's going to look something like this. So here's an example. It's not 100% exactly like yours, but it's very similar. I'm not sure if you have the overview tab, but it's basically all the information that I've already spoken about at length. The program code tab is going to be a place where you can upload your PDF. Remember that comments are totally okay here. It's in the screenshots that you have to remove all your comments. You're going to download all of your code into one PDF, and I'll show you how to do that right now. At the far right tab, you're going to see more. Scrolling down a little bit, you'll see a button that says print. When you click the print button, you're going to be presented with two options. One is to print and one is to print without a name. So I'm going to choose the print without a name. When it comes to uploading anything for College Board, it's really important that you know that nothing that identifies you and who you are, what gender you are, what race you are, your socioeconomic status, nothing can be tied back to you. So that's why the print without a name is really important. So keep that in mind when you're uploading any single thing to College Board. I'm presented with a box to save it as a PDF. Some of you might not see the Save as a PDF button, and you might see a printer that you have at your house. All you have to do is click on Destination and make sure you choose the Save as a PDF button. Once you save it, go ahead and give it a name that doesn't have anything to do with you as a student. So for example, the name that it gave me here is youre-a-wizard-harry _CodeHS. So I can call it like AP Create, Performance Task, and that's good enough. And I'll save it on my downloads. So let's go back to AP Classroom so we can upload our PDF. Now, my view looks a little different than yours. You're not going to see most of this. I see every student here, but what you're going to see is an upload button. Go ahead and upload your PDF. Keep in mind, you don't want to submit anything as final until you're absolutely sure that you've done every single thing. So once you've uploaded it, you can leave it there and it'll save for you as progress. And you can go back to it a little later on when you feel like you're ready to upload your final project. Now let's go to the video tab. Here's where you're going to record your app running. And my biggest advice is to run your app, put something in it, like type something in or click on something, whatever your app may be, and then either reset or do something differently within your app to show a different output. Remember that the video can be no longer than 60 seconds and preferably without audio unless audio is a real big part of your code. So like if you have something to do with music, then that's fine. Just make sure that there's no voice coming from you at all. When it comes time to record your video, there are several options. If you have Windows, you can use the snipping tool. If you have the newer version of snipping tool, there's a box to check for recording a video. You can also use Zoom and share your screen on your computer, even though there's nobody in your meeting, and you could record from there. The most important thing is that when you're recording, you have to make sure that nothing that has your name on it is in the video. So if I'm recording my entire screen right here, like I am right now, you'll notice that my name is up here. So there's several ways to avoid that. You can either crop the video after you make it, or when you're using the snipping tool, just drag and don't show the part of your name. I get this question a lot. Can I show my code and the output at the same time? And yes, you can. That's totally fine. As long as the reader is able to see your output. That's like the most important part. I'm gonna explain what this program does in a little bit, but what I really wanna do is show you what I mean about the output. So I'm gonna turn off these function calls real quick, just so I can show you what we're supposed to be doing. So I'm only gonna leave one function, my trip to Ollivanders. And I'm gonna run my program, and you'll see here that I'm presented with several different wands that I can choose from to buy. So I'm gonna choose the very first one, and I'll press the number 1, and it tells me that I don't have enough galleons to make the purchase for Harry Potter's wand. That sucks. So I'm gonna reset it and try a different wand, and maybe I can buy that one. So I'm gonna try, I'll try Elder Wand. And there we go. I'm able to purchase the wand. So that's the program running in about 10 seconds, showing 2 different outputs based on 2 different inputs. The first time I put 1 for Harry Potter's wand, but it's too expensive. And the second time I put 7 for Elder Wand, and I was able to buy it. Let's go back to the video tab. Once you're ready, you can go ahead and upload here. Just like with the program code, do not hit Final Submit. You can do that once everything is uploaded and you feel ready to go to submit everything at once. Great, now let's move on to the last tab, the PPR. The PPR stands for Personalized Project Reference. This is where you're going to take screenshots of different parts of your code. On the day of the exam, your FRQ is going to be based on these screenshots. So it's super important that you get it right because you need it for the day of the exam and you don't want to miss anything that should have been there. So I'm going to jump back into my app and I'm going to uncomment all these function calls so you can see what this app is supposed to do and kind of how it works. So I have several calls to functions. I have a welcome function, I have a sorting hat function, a buffer which just puts a little bit of lines in between, a go to Gringotts Bank which allows the wizard to deposit money or withdraw money from the bank, another buffer, which again is just the little lines in between, and then a trip to Ollivanders. So let's run this. I'll make it a little bigger so you can see better. Great. So this is just a series of questions that is very common in like the Pottermore quizzes. And it's saying like, for example, what do you value most? I value bravery. Great. And I'm just going to hit A for all these so that way we can move on. Great. So I got sorted into House Gryffindor, and here's the banner for that house. All right. Now we're going to go to Gringotts Wizarding Bank. And I have several options I could choose from. I can view my balance, I could deposit some galleons, and I could withdraw galleons. Galleons are just like the money they use in that world. And then when I'm ready to finish, I'll just hit 4 to exit the bank. So let's see how much money I have in my account right now. I have 800 galleons in my account. All right, cool. Let's make a deposit. I'm going to add in 10,000 more galleons. Ball in. Okay, cool. So here's my deposited amount. I have 10,000 that I deposited, and now my total balance is 10,800, which makes sense. Great. I'm done with my bank. So now I'm going to move on. Now we're going to Ollivander's Wand Shop. This is a list of all the wands that I can buy. And now right now I have a lot of money. So I can't choose Harry Potter's wand, which is the most expensive one. So I'm going to choose 1 to buy his wand. I could choose 1, or I could also type in Harry Potter's wand, whichever I want to do. I'm going to do Harry Potter's wand. Great. Now it tells me, Ollivander hands me Harry Potter's wand, and he says, ah yes, Harry Potter's wand. A very fine choice indeed. Thank you for shopping at Ollivander's. That's it. Very simple. So I'm going to reset my program now, but this time I'm not going to deposit any money. In fact, I'm going to withdraw money so that way I don't have enough money to buy a wand that I want. So I'm going to run it again, and I'm just going to choose A again to get into House Gryffindor, and I'm going to withdraw money this time. Now I'm going to withdraw 400 galleons. So my new balance is 400 galleons. Great, now I'm done, so I'm going to exit the bank and I'm going to go back to Ollivander's. So here's a list of all the wands. So now I'm going to choose Sirius Black's wand, and it's going to show a different outcome based on a different argument. Whereas before I typed in Harry Potter, now I'm typing Sirius Black's wand. Great, Ollivander turns to me and says, oh dear, I'm afraid you don't have enough galleons to make that purchase. You only have 100 galleons in your bank at the moment. Please do return when you have an additional 300 galleons. So it's telling me how much money I need to buy that wand and to come back with that money. And then he's going to reserve it for me until I do. That's it. 2 calls to this function, 2 different arguments. The first one was Harry Potter's wand. The second one was Sirius Black's wand. And the output was different. It doesn't have to be a crazy different output. Just something different happens based on the call. So now let's go a little deeper and look at the actual code. I'm going to walk through the whole code, but I don't want to spend too much time on every single function. I'm really going to spend more time on one specific function. So now we're inside of my project. And then here's where I'm telling my story. I welcome the user. I figure out which house they belong to with the sorting hat. I call a buffer so that way in the output there's a little bit of space in between and some lines. I go to Gringotts Bank so that way the user can deposit some money, withdraw some money, or see how much is in their account. Another buffer to put some line in between, and then a trip to Ollivander's. So let's go looking at each one of these. I'm going to start towards the bottom because that's where all the data is kind of hanging out, and then I'll show you each of these functions. Okay, so we're at the bottom of my code. Now, don't freak out that I have 387 lines. The majority of those lines are the house banners, like this one. This one's for House Slytherin. So the first function that's called is welcome, and all it does is it displays a welcome message when the user first runs my program. Here's my function buffer that all it does is print some space in between each thing, along with some asterisks and some lines. This is really just for a visual aesthetic. I have several functions that handle just the banners of the houses. So this is for House Slytherin, Ravenclaw, there's Hufflepuff down there, and the last one is Gryffindor. And now here I have a variable called wand prices. And what it's doing is it's storing the cost of every single wand, and I've lined them up to be based on the index. So the first value here is 1,000, and that's the cost of the first wand in the wand list. And I'll show you the wand list in a second. The next value is 400, which is the second wand in the wand list. And these are the costs for each wand. So I've lined up their indexes to match the same as the wand list. So let's take a look at the wand list. So right above, here's my variable called wand list. And I've laid it out this way so that way I can see it a little bit better with my human eyeballs. So the very first wand is Harry Potter's wand, and that wand is 1,000 galleons. Sirius Black's is 400 galleons. And I've just lined them up just like this. So here's Harry Potter's wand, the cost, and here's Sirius Black's. Here's Harry Potter's wand, and here's Sirius Black. If you do this, this is a nice way to have multiple lists, but you align them in a way to make sense for each thing. And now moving up a little bit, I have all of my questions for the Pottermore quiz. I've laid them out this way, again, for my human eyeballs to kind of see, and if there's a problem, I can space things out a little better. And moving up, we have a function called house result. Now, the way this works is earlier in my code, I have other functions to figure out which house somebody belongs to. And whatever that result is, it gets sent here, and then whatever house banner should appear gets called. Moving up a little bit, I have find house. Now what this does is based on the list of questions and the answers that the user gives, this function is called and it passes that list and it basically tries to figure out which number in that list is the biggest number. And whatever the number that is, it returns the index of where it found it. Now here I have a function called sorting hat. And what it's doing is it's setting each of these variables to be 0, and each of these variables represent the house that the user is probably going to end up in. But every time the user answers something, we add 1 to each of these variables, to each of these house variables. Now for simplicity for this project, we aligned it so that if anytime they typed in A, it is a +1 to Gryffindor. Every time they typed in B, it was a +1 to Ravenclaw, and so on. And so that's what's happening right here in this for loop. Depending on what the person types, we're going to just go ahead and add 1 to the house that it belongs to. Once we're done with that and the loop is finished, then we're going to push all those numbers into a list and call that find house list that I just showed you a second ago. And based on that, then a house gets chosen. And then based on that, that result comes right back here. And then we call house result, so that way the banner of the house can be shown to the user. Now I know that might be confusing if you weren't in my class, but just remember, you want to take a problem and break it down into smaller problems. It's a lot easier to solve a really small problem than it is to solve a big problem. And the way we do that is functions. Make a function that handles something specific, something smaller, than trying to do everything at once in one function. It just makes it easier. It also makes finding problems easier too. All right, going back to my code now, I have this function called go to Gringotts Bank. And this is what we saw earlier with the bank. And the user can add money, withdraw money, view their balance, or exit the bank. And so all this is doing is using a while true loop and keeps asking the person, well, what do they want to do? Do they want to deposit? If they do, great, we'll put some money in there. And that's what's happening right here. Do they want to see how much money is in their account? We'll do that right here. And do they want to withdraw some money? Now I do have all these edge cases, like if they put a negative number or if they don't put a number at all. You don't really need to solve all of these edge cases for your code. You are the one who is going to use it, and you're the one who's going to record your video. Just focus on that. And now I have a function called trip to all vendors. This is the last call that happens in my start function. So this is the last part of my story. So I tell the user, we're going to head to all vendors wand shop, and then I print out all the wands for them to see, and then I call find wand user input. And this is the function that meets all the requirements that I'm going to use to show you how to upload a College Board. Please remember that you need one function that has the following: a parameter. You can have more than one parameter, but you need at least one. You need a loop to go through your list, or to go through a list, or many lists. You need an if statement. The if statement can be inside of the loop or it can be outside the loop. The most important thing is that the if statement is true when the function is called with one argument, and then false when it's called with another argument or a different argument. You can have an if else, an if, else if, and so on, as long as you have one if at least. I get this question asked a lot. Can it be just an if? Absolutely. When an if evaluates as true, it's going to run what's inside of that if statement. If it's not true, it doesn't do anything and it moves on with the rest of the code if there's anything to do. The absence of nothing is still something. So just remember that when you call your function, you want to hit that if statement for it to be true one way, and then if it gets called again with a different argument, that if statement does not become true. Now, you can have 100 different functions. You just need one with all those requirements. Everything else shouldn't be a priority. This is the priority. Now you also need an input and an output, but that should be natural already. An input is anything that the user does. They type something, they click something, they drag something, and then the output is what do they see as a result of those actions. If they type something in, something should be coming back out and telling them something or showing them something. Now let's go back into my function and let's see how we're going to take screenshots. So here's my function find wand, and the parameter is user choice. It's basically waiting to receive whatever the user decides to buy. So for example, if they type in Harry Potter's wand, then Harry Potter's wand gets passed here. If they type in the number 2, then the number 2 gets passed here. And so I set up my function to receive any kind of choice that the user makes and then do something with that. So the very first 2 lines of code in this function are 2 variables that are going to determine the wand and the price of that wand. And I'm using this for loop right here to go through the entire list of wands. And inside the for loop, I have an if statement that is checking to see if the user typed in a number or if they typed in the name of the wand. And the reason why I have user choice -1 is because what the user sees is numbers starting at 1. However, my loop begins at 0, so I have to compensate for that. This is actually a fairly common style. Some programmers put a null value at the very first index 0, of a list, and then just start their loop at 1, and they don't have to worry about that. So there's different ways you can address that, but just remember what the user sees is kind of different than what the program needs or is doing. So if they type in a number, I'm going to check to see if my counter variable I is that same number. And if it is, then I know I'm at that point in the list that that is the one that the user wants. If they type in a name, for example, Harry Potter's wand, then I'm just checking to see is Harry Potter's wand the string in this list. If either of these are true, then I found my wand and I found my wand price. And so I'll store those in these two variables, which are the same ones that I have up here. Once the loop is finished, I have if statements down here that are going to check to see what's supposed to happen as a result. So for your program, you don't have to actually handle every single edge case possible. But this is my style, so this is how I'm doing it. So my first if statement is checking to see if it found no wand at all. And the reason why it's checking if found wand is equal to empty strings is because that's the way the variable was when it was created. It had an empty string at the beginning. And so if found wand never changed, then that means it didn't find a wand. And so I'll tell the person, I'm sorry, but it appears your wand is not in that list. I'm going to hide the output so that way you can see a little better. My else if here is checking to see if the wand that the user wanted is in their budget. So I have found wand price, and it's checking to see if it's less than or equal to the account balance. You'll remember that the go to Screenshots bank function allows the wizard to add more money or subtract more money. And so based on that account balance, they should be able to buy a wand or not. If this is true, then I'm going to tell them all the vendor hands you the wand that you wanted. So for example, this will say all the vendor hands you found wand. And then it goes on to say, yes, the found wand, in this case, it might be Harry Potter's wand. A very fine choice indeed. Thank you for shopping at Ollivanders. If none of these are true, then we move on to the else, and this is what gets printed. Ollivander turns to you and says, oh dear, I'm afraid you don't have enough galleons to make that purchase. You only have blank number of galleons in your bank account at the moment. Remember, this account balance is storing what the wizard has in their bank. Then it says, please do return when you have an additional, and then it does some math here to tell the person, to tell the wizard, how much more galleons they need. So we'll take whatever the wand price is that they want, and we'll subtract the account balance that they have, and that is the number that will show them that they need to have when they come back. And then he says, until then, I shall keep your wand reserved for you. Now let's go take screenshots of our code. I'm going to give you some tips and tricks on how to do that. Now, because my account doesn't look exactly like yours, I'm going to use a PDF to kind of show you how this is going to work. So once you click on this personalized project reference, you're going to see options to take screenshots, and it's going to look something like this. For the very first screenshot, we're asked to take a picture of our function. This is the one function that has a parameter, a loop, and an if statement. You want to make sure that you're also using a list because you're going to be talking about a list. You might talk about a list. It might be a question in the FRQ. So make sure that function is using a list in some way. So I'm going to go back to the PDF of my code, and I'm going to take screenshots. When you're looking at your code as a PDF, you want to make sure that nothing is cut off. So take some time to try to compare the PDF version and the code version, specifically the edges. So sometimes the sides here can be cut off, but most of the time it's fine. This only happens sometimes. CodeHS is pretty good about bringing things in and not passing the margins. So just make sure that nothing is cut off here on the side. I'm going to go ahead and take a screenshot now of my function. This is the one that I want to talk about on exam day. And if you notice, the closing brace is past the first page. This is fine. You can still take a screenshot of it. It's okay if it's broken up. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit more and take a screenshot from here. To take a screenshot, if you're using a Mac, it's Command-Shift-S. And for Windows, I can't remember. I think it's Windows S. But you can use the snipping tool as well. So I'm going to go ahead and line it up just like this. And I want to include the numbers for each line. And the reason why you want to include the numbers for each line is so that way when you go to talk about your code, you can say for my for loop on line 37 or for my if statement on line 39, and it just makes it easier to talk about. So I'm going to go back to upload my screenshot. And again, this is a PDF, but it's going to look very similar to this. And I'm going to take my screenshot and copy and paste it there. It looks really small there, but when you actually do it, it'll take the whole picture and you'll be able to see how good it came out. Now, for the second screenshot, I'm going to go and search for where is the call to this function, to the function that I just pasted here, to my function with a loop, an if statement, a parameter. So now I'm going to go look for where this find wand function is being called. And I know where it's being called. It's being called right here. So again, be sure to include the line number when you take the screenshot. So here's line 29. I'm going to go ahead and copy my screenshot, and I'm going to take it back into here and drop it right here. Great, and there's my call. And now in the third part, we're going to go ahead and take a picture of a list that we are using. Now, I'm using two lists. So you can upload both lists if you want. I'm going to upload one for now. So I'm going to go down back to my PDF of my code, and I'm going to search for my list, and it's pretty far down. You know what? I'll just take a screenshot of both. That way it makes things a little easier. Again, you want to include the line numbers, and that looks pretty good. And I'm going to go ahead and copy this and go back to paste it. Again, it's going to look small here, but in the actual website, it'll be normal size. So this is where you're just showing where the list is. The fourth part which is the second part of just this list category. This is where you're going to show where are you accessing things in your list, like where are you looking through this list. This is why I said you could take pictures of more than one list, because in my case, I am using 2 lists, but I'm only really going through one list. I'm going through the list of wands. So I'm gonna go back to my code and go back to that function that has the parameter and the if statement and the loop, and I'm gonna look to see where am I accessing things from a list. So here's that function again. And right here in my for loop, in my if statement, I'm looking to see if the name of the wand is typed in by the user, if it's in this list. I'm also technically looking for index numbers, but I'm not really looking at a list necessarily. I'm looking at a variable I that's just counting. So in this case, I really want to focus on this. Is the name that they typed in somewhere in this list? Now, I am using more than one list to figure out the price and the name of the wand, but again, I'm only really looking through one list. However, I want you to, in this case, I'm going to take a screenshot of this whole for loop. That way, on the day of the exam, I could talk about what this loop is doing and how it's checking things in this list. In my case, I don't have to take a picture of this stuff because it's not really using a list necessarily. And plus, the entire function has a picture up at the top, as that was the first screenshot that we took. So I really want to focus just right here in this loop. So I'm going to go ahead and take a screenshot of this now. Starting on line 37 and ending at line 45. That's where the closing brace is. Take a picture of that. I'm going to go copy it, and I'm going to paste it into the second part, the fourth part, and paste it here in the fourth part. And that's it. I have my entire function at the very top. I have the call of where it's happening. And remember that the function call has to be called more than once, or the ability to be called more than once with different arguments. In my case, I only have one call, but depending on what the user does, different arguments can be passed to it, so different things can happen. A different wand can appear. I don't have enough money. The wand doesn't exist. I have many different options based on what the user does. And then further down, I have my lists. Again, it could be one list, it could be several lists. Try to be targeted though. If you have 100 lists, don't take screenshots of 100 lists. Do the ones that you think you're going to talk about, especially the one that your loop is going through. Focus on that. And for the last part, my loop is going through my wands list and checking to see if what the user typed in is somewhere in that list. And that's it. I hope you found this video helpful. My biggest recommendation is that you take things slow, go line by line in your code, make sure all of that is good before you start any of this. And for some of you, this is your first year of programming. For others, this may be your first year in an AP class. Though I am getting more gray hairs, and I do get a little less sleep than before, I am grateful to have all of you in my classroom. And if you need any help, please come see me. Don't forget to join me on mock exams that I'm hosting the next 3 weekends. We really want to strive for a 5, but no matter what happens, my door is always open to you. If you want to come by to talk, or if you ever want a cup of coffee. And I wish you all the best of luck on the AP exam. See you around.